my dad was a mechanic, and if it didn't have a motor on it, he didn't care about it. So everything was about hot rods and racing and going fast, and that was, singularly the only thing my dad has ever cared about was a V8 engine, and so it was fun to be around that, but I never had exposure to farm life.
Well, I don't know a whole lot, and I don't know any issue that would help you get elected. Once you get elected, maybe we can come ask you for some favors or something. The only thing I'd say, I've had quite a little bit of help from the NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and you guys probably have too.
Some of the things like cross fencing and water supply within each of those paddocks of pasture and all of that, a lot of that probably could not be done or would not be done without some assistance.
Well, the slogan of the NRCS is helping farmers help the land.
Okay.
So, we get the money, but hopefully it's making the world a better place.
It's more of a rehabilitation program in a sense, in that when you think about it that way.
Roy can probably speak to it better, but it's cut down on erosion and water pollution, any type of pollution. That's what their goal is.
Mm-hmm.
And with us rotating and not standing, an old cow standing in a pond all the time and having a water tank to go to or a tank out of a pond, that way it helps with that. And not grazing it into the dirt like ours is right now because of the drought. But if your soil doesn't erode off and you take care of the land better.
You're talking to people, though, that's farming just because we like to farm.
Mm-hmm.
We're small farmers, and the amount of income we have is pretty small compared to, and the profit's smaller than that.
Yeah. Why isn't the money there from the operation, I guess, or why do we need grants and things like that?
Well, I'm not really too much for giving away money, even at that. But now we've always, of course, these aren't state funded. NRCS is like a federal deal, I'm sure. Row crop farmers have always seemed to get more, bigger share of it than we get up in here. I don't know how they do that.
Cut your cattle, because you're a cattle farmer,
But now I've heard of row crop farmers, just farming for the government money. I sure don't like that.
I guess when I think about it, I wonder about. Well, we talked a little bit on the phone. I think about the meat packing. There's so few meat packers, so the price obviously drives up there.
It's going to the big man
Right.
now because I watched them tell the other day on Superior. They got to change my TV deal, but I used to watch those Superior auctions all the time. Where they auction cattle off on internet and stuff, and TV. And that one old boy out west had sold 1 million head of cattle through them. Now you stop and think about that, how much land and stuff he had to have. Which that's all right, but that's the one they're leaning to now.
Yeah.
They've tried to put regulations on us down the last few years that I said I'd quit before I'd put up with it.
Yeah.
They want to tag every cow you got with them things in their ears, stuff that little fellas just can't hardly do.
Because you got to take all the expense of that on then. Yeah.
They were going to make it mandatory. We put it in every one. That way it's a farm of origin, tells where that cow was started and where she's been ever since, every calf. And they said because they told that was just a nominal fee. Well, our calf informed them that's not a nominal fee. When you're talking $5-6 a head for the tags, then you got to have a reader to read those chips, thousands of bucks for those. So it's not a nominal fee when, like Roy said, when your profit margin ain't very high anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of your large ones not in Arkansas.
Right.
Your big cattle producing farms are out west, and they may not own a very big farm, but they lease a lot of government land. And that's how they can run so many head. They only bring them in during the winter.
Yeah.
They summer them all over on that government land where they pay pennies on the head, and they don't have to worry about fertilizer, bulldozers, or nothing like we do, keeping ground cleaned up and working.
Where do you guys sell your products then, or where are you getting your sales from?
I sell my cattle at West Plains, the Ozark Regional Livestock thing most of the time. Of course, we've got a local barn at Ash Flat and Charlotte, down below Baseball. The sale barns are kind of going out, but still got. But we just sell mainly what we call feeder cattle, and then I wean mine and get them up to about sometimes 700 or 800 pounds.
You kind of mentioned that the sale barns are going away, or
Yeah.
what's that all about?
Yeah, well, that's just the part of life, I guess. Back at one time, we had people were hauling their cattle in the back of a pickup truck or something, The Ash Flat sale barn went in, and oh gosh, does anybody know exactly when? I was in school up there. Somewhere early 60s, I suppose. And they've stayed in business all this time. But now a bunch of them have come and gone. The one in, well, they might sell 1,000 head at Ash Flat on a good day. And West Plains, will sell 3,000 or more sometimes. So they've just got more buyers coming in there.
Volume at that point.
And the little guys it's just
They still have a little sale at Salem, don't
I was
they?
about to ask you about
the
that.
economics of the thing.
It's mostly goats. That's their big thing is goats,
Yeah.
but they do sell few cattle.
Yeah, see, there used to be a sale barn. Where do you live?
I live in Mountain Home.
See, there used to be a big sale barn at Mountain Home.
Yeah. I think more and more people have a less and less understanding of what small farms do,
Yeah.
what struggles you face, and even honestly how you contribute to the local food supply. And even myself, for instance, like I'm here trying to learn some of that stuff. So if we can just even talk about that. My fear always for small farm, the same as it would be for small business, is that too often, just like you all mentioned, things are written for the bigger corporations, and we don't always have like a separate set of rules for the little guys or whatever it might be. And it's awesome that there's some of those sustainable programs out there that help you keep your operations sustainable and benefit the wildlife and environment at the same time. Sounds like they're not being funded as well these days, but I'm not looking to drag out a hot button issue. I was going to ask you, my next question actually was
You'll have some influence on funding state fairs and the co-op, the extension agencies in each county. There'll be a lot of stuff coming before you.
And there's state programs in with that NRCS, because ours is right in the same building in Salem. But there's state programs that do a lot of the same things, and they got different guidelines to go by too.
Now, some of that is through the conservation districts.
Yeah.
Each county has a conservation district and a board of directors, and they can write grants and stuff. And you were talking about the price of cattle. The way I understand it, and I've read several articles, but I still don't know if I quite understand it. There's a lot of them that are, and I think this is the controversy, that are a negotiated price. Like there's Angus has what they call certified Angus beef program. If they're black-hided and if they meet a certain criteria, grade choice, high choice, and yield grade something, and they've got a formula that they buy those cattle through.
It's pre-negotiated basically, so it's not really an auction because
Right.
the buyers have all
Right.
agreed to pay.
And
Yeah.
some of the legislators are thinking it's gonna be better if they can put a limit that a higher percentage of those have to be sold on a cash basis. But some of the people, cattlemen's groups and stuff, are saying that that's not gonna help anything. And when it trickles back to us, I don't think it's gonna matter. I can't see that it's gonna affect us either way.
I just wonder, why is there not more Packers? I mean, what's
Well, it
what's
used to
stopping?
be, see, that's what's hurting us. Now, I've never done it, I ain't big enough to, but some of the boys up home are big enough to send their own cattle out there. They fatten them out and sell them out there. But there used to be about 10 packers. And they would walk by your pen of cattle. If they were finished, I reckon they notified them when this pen
They do.
was finished.
They do.
And they'd come by and bid on them, just like a sale barn. Well, we done away with our antitrust laws. Basically, we've stripped them out of this country. That's what's wrong with everything for the little man, trying to compete with them. Now we've got 4, basically. They walk by and they tell you what they'll give for that 10 cattle. That's it. There ain't nobody else gonna bid against them. You take what they offer you and that's it.
The industry has just moved, and I don't know anything you can do about it. All the feedlots are out west. Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, the Texas Panhandle. Those cattle do a lot better out there in the dry. It's too muddy here in the wintertime. Cattle will be wading mud up to their belly. So all the cattle are going out there. And then that's where the packers are located also. So, that's where all of our cattle go. I don't know.
That supply chain got so efficient that everything gravitated to one center.
There's
But
grains out there.
You
yeah,
don't truck the grain to the cattle that way. You
Yeah.
take cattle out there, finish them out, slaughter them right there because your grain's right there close. You just bring it in there, feed them. But that's the trouble. People don't understand, don't know, anything about. They just, they don't go to the grocery store. That's where they get it. They don't have a clue what we do out here and the labor intensive it is. But and the trouble I was watching the news the other night about Springfield. They had an economist on there talking about the inflation, and I got so mad. I'm still not above calling them and talking to them.
yeah.
But he's an economist. He's supposed to know this. He is telling them about food. They were talking about grocery bills being high. He said, well, let's just take the meat industry, for instance. He said, well, the meat industry said it's been a hot, dry summer. They've had terrible drought. They're having to pay more for their feed and their hay, and that's the reason meat's higher. No. I am paying more for feed and hay, but that does not mean I'm getting more for my product. I don't, because we're on an open market.
Mm-hmm.
And we aren't, actually prices went down because we flooded the market because people were selling out of cattle because it was hot and dry.
Yeah.
So, when you got people that's supposed to understand the economy and how it works, and they don't understand it,
Yeah.
then we're in trouble.
Because they're not looking at they're not looking at the entire supply chain to see
Right.
where the break. So that profit is being swallowed by the
Packers.
packing. Yeah. Well, is there anyone out there? This was my next question for y'all, and I wondered: is there not any effective organization or voice out there that you're seeing advocate for local supply chains, or just even inside of the state? Like, it seems like as the state of Arkansas, we should be not wanting to be dependent on Nebraska or whoever's. Like, we're kind of putting our own state at risk here by outsourcing a lot of that, if you will. But I know there's like the co-ops and some of those kind of, but do any of them try to be a voice for local supply chains or state-based?
State-wise, I don't think really anybody really looks out for us. And we do have a state cattlemen's. Like I said, I'm a member of RCAF, and I didn't realize that the cattlemen's, I knew it did it, but I don't know how many years back, they took in the packers as memberships. Well, that's where all the money's at. They've got the big money to support the Cattlemen Association. So that's when the cattlemen steered, they're looking out for the packers too. They're not just the cattlemen. It's not even called the cattlemen anymore. It's National Cattlemen's and something. It's NC. It's got more acronym there than used to be there. And that's what they did. They took in the meat processing as part of their membership. And RCAF, the reason I'm not promoting, nobody knows this, but I got to looking into them and listening to their literature and things, and they are more for just the producer. That's all they're looking out for. And of course they're nationwide, but they fought some things that, like I said, the tagging deal to help the small producer because of the overhead that we have to put into it and everything.
The packer has been, the last few years, been making way too much, more than anybody else. But
What's their response? Do they have a response from like their industry where it's like, no, don't blame us?
Tyson got sued and had to pay a big fine, but they just keep doing what they're doing because they're so big.
The fine is.
But still, the economics is still there. They're buying cattle and processing them and selling the meat. So there's nothing there that says they have to make a profit. Whenever the supply gets down enough, they're going to pay more for the cattle. And when we're giving them plenty of cattle, they're not going to pay us any more than they have to, you know.
Well, the old boy with RCAP put out a video this week, and he was talking about, he said, if that stands true, then he said prices are going up a little bit now. But he said they should have, he said what actually happens and what the supply and demand, they have manipulated the market. Because he said you can look at the history tells it, you know, truthfully, that's the way it used to be. You know, supply and demand, it dictated. But now we've got those boys that have such limited markets, and they manipulate the price they pay. And I just, you know, I'm not for them to go broke at all, but I don't want to starve out over here either trying to produce, you know, helping them. I'm producing what they're doing. Now theory is, and it's been out there for a long time, is they just can't quite figure out how to do it, is get the cattlemen to be like the hog producer and the chicken producer.
Mm-hmm.
And because they own the animal, you supply them the land and the facilities and the labor. And on those productions now.
So instead of you, go ahead.
I watched the hearings up in Washington, D.C. They had 3 producers. Well, they had 2 producers, and I call them the White Hat Boys, National Cattlemen's Association. He was just their mouthpiece for them. And they had a young farmer from up here in Missouri that was about to lose everything he had during COVID. And he had contemplated suicide and everything else because it was a family deal passed down to him, and that makes it special to us people that do that. And the Democrats questioned him, and they had an older producer from out west at a ranch. They never asked him a question. All the ones the Republicans even questioned was the Cattlemen's Association man. It was very obvious they didn't want to hear from this young guy that was in trouble up there, how they could help him. And they didn't want to hear from the old guy because he was educated. He could talk to them. He wasn't just a common old country boy. And they didn't want to talk to him either. The Democrats did. They talked to the old man and the young guy. They asked the other guy questions, but they wasn't the kind of questions that they wanted to be put out on the air.
Yeah.
It was very obvious. And that's what we run into. Because I asked my dad once, I said, why are you such a Democrat? And he said, son, all I've ever had was this old land you're trying to make a living on. And it's always easier to make a living under a Democrat than it is a Republican. And he said, that's as simple as I know how to put it. It's still that way. The highest cattle I ever sold in my life was under Obama. I never thought I'd see the day that I could sell a weaned calf for $1,500.
What do you think led to that?
Part of it is, I got a call from a cattlemen's association. A little old gal called me once running a poll. And she said, she was asking me all these questions. And I said, well, it's the economy. If the old boy in the city has got money in his pocket, he's going to buy steaks for his family once in a while. Otherwise, he's going to buy chicken or whatever's the cheapest thing he can feed him. And I said, if he does good, we do good. When Obama was selling them calves, there was more than 2 trucks, more new tractors, more land bought, fences built, barns built than I've ever seen in my life in this country. Because they finally got some money in their pocket, and they've been wanting that for years.
Yeah.
And they spent it. And that drives your economy.
Yeah.
But the Republicans believe from the other way.
Trickle down.
Trickle down
Yeah.
economics.
Well, I always think of that in terms of creating consumers, and we need consumers that are healthy, and that means that they got
Right.
expendable income. They're not staying up at night because they can't pay their half. If they're worried about paying their medical bills or being foreclosed on, they're sure not worrying about buying a sirloin or a T-bone or
Right.
whatever it is. I'm with you there. That's something I spend a lot of time worrying about as an American, not as a candidate. Just that we had decades of very healthy consumerism, where a middle class had their needs met and they could still, get that tractor, get that second vehicle, save for your kids' education, whatever it might be,
Build a house.
and build a house. And now the entire middle class, along with small business, along with small farms, we're all like, not paycheck to paycheck always, but it's definitely much closer to that sort of society for a larger amount of people.
The reason we're in the shape we're in is simple. It's greed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's no shortage of gas. You can buy all you can want. They've had record profits for the last 2 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy all of it you want. It wasn't like when Carter was in there when they were rationing it.
Yeah.
And he said it's just simple.
Yeah.
Groceries that's what's wrong with them in the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
If I could sell 1 calf and make as much money as I could on 10, I guess I'd be kind of intended that way myself, but that's what's happening.
Yeah. That's a big frustration I have as a candidate because, even though I'm brand new to this, never been in Washington, I'm so far outside of any kind of DC politics world. But online, I have to argue against that. I mean, that's what I get hit with is national politics stuff,
Yeah.
stuff. And everybody wants to talk about the economy and inflation, which I certainly understand. But I'm like, how do you not, when you look in every direction, in every industry, and you see examples of what you say, you see examples of monopolies, and right along with it, record profits of all time. And it's like, we so want to turn a blind eye to corporate America every time, it drives me crazy because it's like, man,
Follow the money.
if you go back to the Republican platform, my favorite Republican is Teddy Roosevelt. And if you follow the Republican platform back long enough, there was no one that was tougher and stronger on basically corporate greed and takes over monopolies than the Republicans of the early 1900s. But it fractured their party so much that Teddy went and started a new political party and left the Republicans. And really, ever since then, I've not seen a Republican that was willing to stand up to that or even be willing to talk about antitrust or stuff like that. But
Changing the subject
Sure.
a little bit, you have 2 teachers sitting here
Yeah.
also, retired teachers.
yeah.
The one thing that you will be involved in is education,
Mm-hmm.
bills on education. To me, the big thing on education is there are too many guidelines put out by the State Department and all of that. You've got to teach this, you've got to teach this, you've got to teach this. I understand what they used to call frameworks, or years ago it was called basic skills in each subject area and all of that. I understand basic skills and framework, but to request that a teacher take this list of concepts or outcomes and you've got to teach this. I mean, you're just following the state.
Yeah.
And of course, there's supposed to be people that are educators and all of this, and you've got the math teacher sitting down and writing up all of these guidelines, but it doesn't always fit.
Yeah. My campaign's been pretty strong on the drumbeat for teachers, especially lately. The pay thing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the minimum salary is a big issue, and then especially, you know, out here in Melbourne, Viola, Valley Springs, Bergman, these really small schools that are in my district are losing teachers within our state to bigger school districts, or sometimes even across the county. They're just a bigger school because the pay disparity is that huge from the west side to the east side of a particular county.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been paying attention to that and working with that, and I was really lucky. I got a group of 10 teachers to meet with me the other day, kind of like we're doing now. And I got to sit down and talk with them for a while, and they opened my eyes about a lot of things that, you know, that the media or the legislatures never talk about, and it come back to a lot of it. I think is evolving from what you said, but they talk about having to teach for that ACT,
Mm-hmm.
how the standardized testing.
Yeah.
Yeah, how that has caused a problem, and that, and you probably can speak better on this than I can, but basically they have a population of their students that are special ed, and so the kids in special ed have to take the same test the general education students take on the ACT, which they're not. They're special ed. They're not. You know, they're not capable really of taking those tests. Just to be honest, they're certainly not educated towards that test because they're trying to make improvements based off last year, not based off of some sort of regulation that's handed down. But because they have to take that same test, that pulls the grade then down of the entire school district. And the consequences of that, I'm still trying to decipher. But I think does it come down to funding even, or yeah. So it's like the consequences of just that to me is insane.
Well, used to they didn't test those kids.
Yeah.
And if they did test them, that was kept separate just to see where they were at,
As
like
it
you were
should.
saying, to improve.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, you've got what that come from is we've got somebody down there in Little Rock
Mm-hmm.
that went to school one time, so he's an expert on education, evidently.
Yeah.
You know, that's what really gets me with politicians. Just because
Yeah.
they went to school, they think they're an expert on education. I went to school to be a teacher.
Yeah.
You know, and jump through all the hoops and things, which many of our teachers now don't have to do because we got a teacher shortage,
Yeah.
and we're having to let people come from way over here just because they can pass that test. They can be a teacher. Well,
Right.
not necessarily, but that's and it is funding wise, and all of course, you are limited. Every school, I don't know if they've raised this or not, I've been out for 2 years, but you could only have a certain percentage of your school system that was classified special ed. You couldn't get above that. And a lot of schools, the 2 schools I taught at were kind of magnets for that, you know.
That's something I've learned recently too that surprised me.
You get a good special ed teacher in there, and they do good with those kids, and they help them along. Well, this kid over here in the next school district over, his mama finds out that they're doing good over there, so she gonna freedom of choice.
Yeah.
Put them over here in this district because her kid's going, and I don't blame her.
Yeah.
So, but then because that's going to up your special ed population in this school, just because everybody's trying to do their job.
Yeah.
And do good by the kids. You're going to penalize that school district because they're doing it.
You know, intuitively, growing up, I saw. I mean, clearly we see teachers disrespected. I mean, every generation has seen teachers disrespected by rebellious kids. But I think in the way that our society has positioned teachers in the You can be a teacher in a lot of places in Arkansas your entire life and never hit the state's median income. And to me, that's a real problem there, because if I'm a kid in school and I'm thinking about a career choice, they don't respect the teachers for one reason, because they know the teachers are broke.
Yeah.
And why would you look up to that if that's not valued by society? And I know it sounds, for us as adults, it sounds really juvenile, but as a kid, I see the same thing with police officers, where you got these kids that don't respect cops. Well, they're like, my daddy makes more than you, or, you know, you make, and they know, I mean, especially these high school kids, they know what you make, they know what these cops make. And I graduated in '04, you know, so it wasn't that long ago for me where I was really having to consider my career. And my dad was drafted, you know, he was in the Army, and I kind of considered military service. I had considered, you know, I always wanted to be involved in something I thought could help people. But every time you go look at those professions that are key or critical to society, you're going to be broke.
Yeah.
And, or, you know, and maybe not broke, but just, I didn't want to, as a 17 or 16-year-old looking ahead at that, I didn't want to go into something that I knew 30 years later I was for sure going to struggle, or not have, you know, whatever sort of level of financial security I felt like I needed to sleep at night. And I just can't help but feel like elevating these teachers to above, and police, let's get them above that median salary to where that's something that kids look up to and they see it as a viable career choice. And I think it'll go a long way towards putting respect back in the classroom too.
If you're going to put out that much money, I don't care what they say about anything, a man's going to take care of his family first.
Mm-hmm.
If he ain't much of a man in my book, that's just me. You're going to go where you can make the best money,
Mm-hmm.
to take care of your family. That's like any other business, farming or anything else. You're going to do the best you can. But when that kid's got to put in the same amount of money, the same, and maybe not as much hours in college and stuff, to get a degree that you make a third as much money as somebody, well, that's why we ain't got no teachers.
Yeah. Yep.
It's simple.
Mm.
You got to make it competitive with the other things, or they ain't going to do it.
Yeah.
You know, you can go to the individual school websites and find a tab that says state required information.
Mm-hmm.
Click on that, and then you'll have a choice, menu choice there, and you can look at the teacher salary for that district.
Yeah.
You can look at the salary for each individual teacher.
Yeah.
You can get all that stuff.
We've looked at it. We have looked, because we've looked at like the difference between, so here's something that got floated out to me, like you can have a teacher in Melbourne with 20 years experience making less than what a new hire in Fayetteville could potentially make. So we've looked at that, you know, where we look at, they call it steps or years of experience,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. But we've looked at that scale, and that scale is widely different.
Some states pool their money from factories and businesses and all of that, and then that money that is collected by the states is then distributed on a per pupil basis.
Yeah.
Arkansas is not that way.
Yeah, and I know that's a big
So
part of the problem.
you've got the business and financial base up around Fayetteville and all of that stuff. Well, 1 mil up there increase would probably take 50 mils here.
Right, it would make a huge
Right,
difference.
right here closer about home than Viola.
Yeah.
Tax base, what's your tax
Oh, yeah.
base?
Yeah. Well, and that's something, you know, back when I was meeting with them, they talk about we're required to have this position or to bring in this position, but the state doesn't necessarily kick in the money for that, so they have to take that out of thin air, which doesn't exist. And my degree is in business, and that's the only experience I have is working inside of businesses and stuff. And it's like, if I'm going to go open a Dairy Queen down here, I'm going to know before I ever open the door or lay a brick on the ground what my minimum operating costs are and what I have to have to run, basically an efficient, sustainable operation, and we do not do that with our schools. So it's like we're critically underfunding our schools, specifically anything that's, I would say I'm throwing something out there random. I could be wrong. 3A or under, 4A or under. The smaller the school, it seems like the more we're impacted because of the funding model, as you mentioned. Fulton County, Violet especially, there's no taxes there. There's very little population.
Well, a lot of those requirements, like, let's say, speech therapists, they're required to have one. Well, a lot of your smaller schools go together and hire somebody, share that expense, and that person travels.
Yeah.
From those different, they're here today, okay, they're here for 2 days at this school, 2 days over here at this school. And that way, that's about the only way they can compete, or actually fulfill the requirements and still, like you said, they don't get any extra money to hire those people.
Yeah.
A lot of times. Sometimes they do. You'll say all the time.
We were talking about, if they do, it usually doesn't cover the whole expense,
Right.
though. It's so much or whatever, or it's for so many years and then it expires, which is no help. Not when you're trying to correct long-term problems.
Right.
One of the things